The moment he said basement, I knew the joke was loaded. Not ha ha funny, more like the kind you chuckle at while planning your third ulcer surgery. You belong in the basement with the binders. He grinned, slick loafers tapping like a drum solo of ignorance. I smiled too, just a twitch at the corner. Not because he was right, but because I had just enough gas in the tank to let him walk straight into the propeller. Upstairs, they were redesigning the company values again. Slideshows about agility, synergy, and some other buzzword they copy-pasted from a failed TED Talk. Meanwhile, I was downstairs, literally, testing fire suppression timers and making sure our occupancy permits didn't lapse into a 30K fine. I keep the building standing while they chase metrics like drunk toddlers with scissors. Ask anyone who ran the annual drills, who kept the first aid kits stocked, who reconciled the merchant account license when it nearly got revoked because legal forgot to tick a box. That'd be me. I don't tweet about it. I just do the damn job. And when the company took that big $110 million growth loan 2 years ago, guess who they asked to negotiate the continuity language? Not because I'm flashy, hell no, but because I know how to hide bombs in plain sight, the kind you hope never go off. The writer had a clause, Section 14. It named me by role and by name as the continuity officer. If I was removed or replaced without a documented bank-approved transition plan. Boom. The loan could trigger a $56 million default clause. Not that anyone reads past page 3 of a covenant. They just saw the term sheet and popped champagne. I even framed the damn thing. A literal copy of the writer mounted in glass, highlighted right over my name like it was the Declaration of Independence. Not for ego, just insurance. You can't call someone invisible when their name's legally bulletproof. Now, 97% of you who hear stories like this, maybe you're nodding, maybe you're fuming, don't even subscribe. If you want more stories like this, raw and real, hit that subscribe button and give a like. It actually helps us a hell of a lot more than you think. Back to Mr. Loafers. He showed up all sparkle and slogans straight from some startup that burned through its Series B because nobody knew what a compliance calendar was. First week, he asked if I'd consider reimagining my scope. I said sure, after you read the covenant appendix and fill out the transition checklist. That got a blink. Second week, he brought up flattening titles, said ops roles should be less visible, more lean. I told him we were already lean, we had one person keeping us out of regulatory hell, and she was talking to him. Week 3, he booked a one-on-one with HR and didn't invite me. That's when I started exporting calendar receipts, pulling Slack logs, archiving every form he left unsigned. I wasn't scared. I was done. Done being the invisible seatbelt they forget until the windshield hits. Done nodding through meetings where I'm called the paper lady while I hold the keys to every renewal, every fire exit, every federal code. They think silence is agreement. What it actually is? A countdown. The email subject line read, Org structure realignment, draft titles. No greeting, no context, just a bullet point list that moved my name 3 boxes down and erased the word lead. That's all it took to demote 20 years of crisis wrangling, 2 emergency certifications, and every soul-sucking midnight call I took when the alarm system had a stroke or the HVAC tried to kill the servers. One tiny edit, and I became Records Associate Basement Ops. Like someone accidentally formatted my dignity out of existence. I didn't yell. I didn't stomp. I did what I always do when someone decides I'm ornamental. I opened the PDF of the loan agreement, took a screenshot of Section 14 where my name sits like a tripwire, and attached it to an email to HR. One line, just confirming, any changes to my title or function still require lender consent under Continuity Rider, Section 14. Please advise before proceeding. They never advised. 3 days passed. The email stayed unread. Meanwhile, Mr. Loafers was workshopping new department names in Slack like he was branding a yogurt company. Flow Ops, Pulse Ops, Ops Next. I started calling us Oops Ops in my head because that's what this whole charade was. A slow-motion disaster in branding. He kept hosting culture huddles and pitching the value of flattened hierarchy, which mostly meant cutting out the people who actually knew what they were doing so he could look innovative in front of the board. Legal didn't blink. They rubber stamped the title change as administrative. No review of the rider, no look at the transition protocol, nothing. Just a standard approved for implementation Q2. I wanted to ask which part of $56 million lender trigger clause they thought was decorative, but sarcasm doesn't land in email chains unless you use bold font, and I wasn't ready to play that card. Not yet. The CFO, he loved it. Called the new structure cleaner. Said it was important we project discipline to our investors. I watched him pat Mr. Loafers on the back like a prize hog at the state fair and talk about leaning out non-revenue functions. Never mind that I personally negotiated 3 vendor credits that saved us over $800K. Never mind that I maintain the only access log the fire marshal actually signs off on. I'm not a slide deck. I don't glow in low light. I'm just the one who keeps the fine print from exploding. But sure, let's cut the non-revenue people. Let's make ops invisible and hand the keys to the intern with Canva skills. I started printing things. Not just emails, metadata, open times, version history, the draft org chart showing my role in the parking lot tab before it got moved into the main sheet. I printed that one twice. No one seemed to notice I stopped attending pulse meetings. I became what they said I was. Basement furniture, silent, still, watching the ceiling for cracks, waiting. Because if no one wants to ask who holds the bank's keys, then no one gets to complain when the vault locks shut. The call to the bank was short, quiet, and precise, kind of like the sound right before a detonation. I didn't start with small talk. I didn't ask how her weekend was. I said, "Melanie, I need confirmation in writing. Section 14 of the continuity rider, the clause about named officer designation and the penalty trigger. Spell it out." She didn't ask why. She knew. Melanie and I have been through 3 vendor fires, 1 regulatory audit, and a power outage that almost shut down payroll. She was the one who flagged the clause for me in the first place 2 years ago, when I was threading needles between lenders and legal while everyone else was playing ping pong on the mezzanine. Within the hour, her email hit my inbox. Per continuity rider, Sec 14. Any change to the named safety and records officer requires prior written approval from our office. Non-compliance constitutes material breach and entitles the lender to declare immediate penalty, currently calculated at $56,000. I stared at the number, like looking at a grenade with the pin halfway out. Then I moved the email into a folder named Safety Net and printed 2 copies. One for my records, one for the meeting they didn't know they'd scheduled. I didn't gloat. I didn't shake. I just got surgical. First, I enabled read receipts for every email from that point forward. If HR opened something and then denied it later, I wanted timestamps. If loafers clicked decline on a calendar invite, I wanted it documented in triplicate. I exported every Google invite I'd sent titled Transition Plan Review and attached the blank files they never touched. Dates, times, reminders. They ignored them all. Each one a breadcrumb on the trail to their own undoing. I archived the unsigned transition checklist. The protocol I wrote in 2021, the one they were required to complete before altering my position under the loan terms. 0 edits, 0 initials, 0 acknowledgement. Like trying to hand someone a parachute on a crashing plane and watching them toss it out the window. Meanwhile, Mr. Loafers was busy filming internal promo videos about redefining operational harmony. In one of them, he actually used the phrase non-essential legacy anchors and smiled like he just cured polio. He even had the nerve to send me a draft script asking if I could help fact-check a few acronyms. I said sure, then attached the clause again. No reply. I began using the copier more often. Not the digital scans, the loud, clunky Xerox in the corner with a wonky tray and no tracking software. It made noise. It drew no questions. I printed every reference to my demotion from Slack. Every sanitized phrase HR had slipped into internal memos. Every doc legal signed off on without checking my role against the covenant. I kept them all in a red folder. Label: in case of executive amnesia. There's a special kind of quiet when you realize they've already tripped the wire. All you have to do is let the signal travel. So I sat. In my little concrete office with the fire door that doesn't latch unless you kick it. Watching the system hum, unnoticed. Waiting for them to click the pen, slide the form, push the button they didn't know was wired straight to the bank. It was a Tuesday when he finally said the quiet part out loud. Posted it right in the General Ops Slack channel like he was announcing free cupcakes. "We'll move blockers to the basement and fix culture," he typed, like I was a desk that needed rearranging. No mention of names, just blockers, like an air filter that needs replacing. I didn't reply. I just took a screenshot, saved the image, and dragged it into the receipts folder I'd renamed Daylight. The language was so smug, so empty it almost made me laugh. If I hadn't been so used to being dehumanized in passive voice, move blockers, fix culture, like he was Marie Kondoing real people, he skipped the handoff meeting. Again. Third time now. It was on the calendar for 11:30. I watched the dot next to his name turn red 5 minutes before, then vanish. No decline, no reschedule, just gone. HR didn't show either. I waited 15 minutes, then marked the event with a note. No attendees, no materials delivered, no compliance checklist reviewed. Saved it as PDF, printed 3 copies. Later that day, I found a post-it note stuck under my door. "Just sign it so we can get this moving," it said. His handwriting, all loops and arrogance, not even an envelope, just a folded HR form and a half-assed request. I scanned it, metadata and all, then slid it into the red folder without flinching. I opened the transition protocol doc on our shared drive. You know the one, required for any role changes involving regulatory coverage. I'd already filled out the top section twice, added meeting invites, even linked the loan covenant clause in a comment bubble. Version history showed 2 people had viewed it, once each. Neither made a single edit, not even a punctuation fix. It just sat there, like a fire alarm with a dead battery. You know what else sat there? The metadata on HR's updated title proposal. I downloaded it, right-clicked, opened properties. Author, Loafers, last modified, 2 days before our meeting. No edits by compliance, no version control from legal, and no attached transition plan. Just a bare, reckless signature line and a blank field for effective date. It was the kind of document you draft when you think systems are polite suggestions and consequences are for interns. Meanwhile, they were redesigning the ops org chart, again. This time, my name was grayed out. Legacy role to be absorbed. That one made me pause. Absorbed. Like I was a cost center getting digested. I printed that too. You'd think all of this would make me furious, and maybe 10 years ago it would have. But now? Now I felt something closer to grim amusement. Because when someone's sprinting toward a cliff, you don't scream. You let the rope play out. Let the Slack posts accumulate, let the skipped meetings log themselves, let the forms pile up with the weight of their own negligence. They weren't just ignoring protocol, they were building a perfect case for breach, piece by damning piece. So I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, closed my office door, and added a new tab to my personal tracker. Disregards by date. 52 entries and counting. The room smelled like toner and reheated ambition. Conference room B, the one with the 2 bright LEDs and the flickering thermostat nobody fixed because we're moving toward remote anyway. HR sat across from me with a practiced, empty smile. To her left, Mr. Loafers tapping his Mont Blanc like it was a conductor's baton. He didn't make eye contact. He was already halfway through his victory lap in his head. "We appreciate your professionalism," she began, sliding the single sheet of HR letterhead toward me. My name was misspelled. The title read, Associate Documentation Compliance. No mention of safety, no reference to named officer status, just neat margins, empty authority, and a pen waiting to end my career like a shrug. He clicked his pen. That's when I said it. Not loud, not dramatic, just even, like reading off a blood pressure number. "Perfect," I said, looking straight at him. "Because the moment you sign that form, this company owes me $56 million. Click. Silence. HR blinked. He laughed. Too quickly, too loud. "Excuse me?" I set my phone on the table, screen up, already dialing. "Hi, Melanie," I said as it rang. "Could you do me a favor? Read section 14 from the continuity writer, please, out loud." He stopped smiling. Melanie didn't hesitate. She was expecting my call. "Of course. Per Continuity Rider, Section 14. The designated safety and records officer shall not be reassigned, demoted, or terminated without prior written approval from the lender. Failure to provide such approval constitutes a material breach, triggering immediate callable penalty, current value $56 million. Click. The pen hit the table. I watched Legal's face drain in real time. The junior counsel in the corner started flipping pages of the loan agreement like it was on fire. HR looked down at the form like it might bite her. No one moved. No one spoke. So I did. I reached into my bag and placed 2 folders on the table, side by side. Option A, reinstatement. Elevation to director, records and safety, full budget control, 5-year consulting agreement with a no retaliation clause, training for all senior execs on covenant requirements. Option B, immediate breach, escalation to lender, wire transfer of $56 million due upon notice. I've documented every skipped meeting, every form you ignored, every protocol you violated, I said, tone flat as a table edge. The deadline is close of business today. Choose carefully. No shaking, no smile, just the weight of their negligence folding the air around us like wet cardboard. They weren't in control anymore. I wasn't just the seatbelt. I was the airbag. And they were about to find out what deployment looked like. Melanie's voice came through the speaker crisp as a scalpel. Failure to provide such approval constitutes a material breach triggering immediate callable penalty, current value $56 million. The way she said it, slow, deliberate, no fluff, it hit harder than a siren. She paused like she was expecting an objection. None came. The room sat still as poured concrete. Legal, finally remembering their job, began flipping through the MSA and lender documents like a raccoon rifling a garbage can. You could hear the slap of paper, the crinkle of neglected clauses. Counsel kept murmuring, "Where was this filed? Why wasn't this flagged? Who had the binder?" I could have told her. I had the binder. It lived next to the fire extinguisher and the backup copy of the state business license. But I let her scramble. Sometimes panic is educational. The CFO, who'd previously been eyeing his phone under the table, froze mid-scroll. His nostrils flared once, then nothing. The breath left him like he'd just realized the gun wasn't loaded with blanks. His fingers hovered over the screen, unsure if this still counted as a meeting or a financial emergency. I could see the math flickering behind his eyes. Interest rates, breach notices, investor calls, quarterly bonuses on the chopping block. Then I calmly reached into my bag and placed the 2 folders down like lunch options. One red, one gray. Red, option A. Reinstatement as Director of Records and Safety, a 5-year consulting contract, dedicated safety budget, a formal no retaliation clause enforceable by the lender, executive training on covenant compliance, access restored, name reinstated in all filings. Gray. Option B, immediate lender breach notification, wire instructions for $56 million to be transferred within 10 business days, or default proceedings begin. Their silence begged me to blink. I didn't. The deadline, I said, is close of business today. You'll need to decide before then. If I don't receive confirmation of signed terms, I escalate to formal default. No further warnings, no more polite reminders. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't uncross my arms. Just kept my gaze level, like I was reciting office hours. This isn't a threat, I added, nodding at the documents. It's a trigger that's already been pulled. Your choice now is how loud the bang gets. Mr. Loafers looked like he was trying to make himself smaller in the chair. HR had stopped blinking entirely, eyes glassy like a deer watching the headlights stretch down the road. Counsel asked, Can we have time to review? You have until 5 I said. Not a minute more. I closed the folders and stood. No drama, no mic drop, just the firm, quiet sound of a chair pushing back across the floor. As I walked out, Melanie's voice was still on the line. Would you like me to remain on standby? She asked. I smiled, finally. No need. They'll find the answer in the red folder. The emergency board call was scheduled for 1 p.m., which in this place meant right after lunch, but before anyone's too awake to notice what matters. I didn't have to attend. My leverage already sat in their inboxes, but I was invited anyway, politely, Urgently, the kind of invitation that smells like desperation wrapped in protocol. They filled the room with muted suits and fake composure. The CEO was dialing in from what looked like a golf course, sunglasses perched on his hat like this was just a routine hiccup, not a financial landmine someone had just stepped on. He smiled like he was still trying to believe none of it was real. The first voice to break the silence? Mr. Loafers. Total miscommunication, he said, leaning forward like a man auditioning for mercy. We believed it was a standard administrative change. Nobody flagged the clause. There was no intent to breach anything. I mean, if there was a problem, someone should have... Someone did. I cut in. His jaw clicked shut like a seatbelt. I opened my laptop, shared screen, and clicked into the folder labeled Receipts. Public. Email thread number 1. Subject. Request for transition. Plan confirmation. Required under SEC. 14. Date stamped. Delivery receipt confirmed. No reply. Email thread. Number 2. Follow up with direct quote of the lender's clause. Read receipt logged. Again, no reply. I zoomed in on the metadata, watched the legal director's brow crinkle when he saw his own name in the view log. Counsel finally broke the awkward shuffle. We didn't execute the transition plan, she said, low and embarrassed. We assumed it was optional. The CFO cleared his throat like he was about to argue, then just gave up and leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling like it might save him. One of the board members, the only one I'd ever seen actually read an operations report, looked straight at me and asked, "Did you set this up?" My response was simple, clear. "I installed a seatbelt," I said. "You just tried to cut it." They didn't respond right away. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was instructional. A slow, dawning recognition that the thing they'd dismissed as just paperwork was the only thing keeping their ship from taking on water. Another director finally leaned in. Why wasn't this caught in compliance review? Counsel started stammering about administrative processing, calendar delays, and department handoffs, the usual air cover. But nobody was buying it anymore, not with Melanie's voice still echoing in their heads, not with my folder marked Option B still sitting unopened on the table like a live grenade. "We're exposed," someone muttered. "No," I said, correcting them. "You were exposed. Now you're just being held accountable." The board requested a 5-minute recess. I stayed seated. Let them pace, whisper, argue like high school seniors caught cheating on the final. It was almost peaceful, watching the panic settle into structure. By the time they came back, their eyes were different, smaller, focused. "Option A," the CEO said over the speaker, "pending your amendments." I didn't nod. I didn't smile. I just said, "Have counsel route the updated contract to Melanie at the bank. I'll hold my formal waiver until I see signatures." Then I clicked Leave Meeting. They wanted a scapegoat. What they got was a mirror. The contract arrived by courier, thick and warm from the printer, the kind of folder that smells like toner and regret. Legal included a cover memo that danced around the word apology, but the signatures told the real story. The CFO's was shaky, counsel's was double-signed, one by accident, the second for emphasis. Mr. Loafers' name was nowhere to be found. They accepted every line. My title was not only reinstated, it was elevated. Director, Records and Safety Operations. For the first time in 15 years, the org chart showed me in bold, not tucked under miscellaneous, not buried in facilities, not folded under legal as a footnote. My own node, with authority, with budget, with final sign-off on operational continuity. The budget line item was approved too, 6 figures allocated to safety training, system modernization, and physical infrastructure. Not because they cared about fire suppression systems or document retention, but because they finally understood the cost of ignoring them. That's fine. Motivation by fear still keeps the sprinklers on. The consulting agreement was locked for 5 years, guaranteed minimum hours enforced by lender requirement. If they ever wanted to sunset my role again, they'd have to do it with bank oversight and a full transition protocol signed, reviewed, and filed with the compliance team. In other words, never. The no retaliation clause was ironclad. Specific language about title protection, role clarity, and reporting lines. I requested, and received a personal assurance from the board that any reorg discussions involving my function had to include my direct input, not suggestion, input. I wasn't the seatbelt anymore. I was the brake system. And Mr. Loafers? Reassigned. Quietly. No goodbye email, no banner in the break room. One morning, his office light just didn't come on. Rumor says he's exploring opportunities in another division that doesn't involve chain of custody or high-stakes paperwork. Probably somewhere with a ping-pong table and zero covenant knowledge. HR never reached out again. A week later, I updated the internal operations manual. Section 1.1, Structural Changes and Chain of Command. One new line, centered in bold, no structural changes may be made without a named transition owner, reviewed and approved by both legal and lending compliance officers. No emojis, no fluff, just the firewall they needed 5 months ago, written in plain English. I should have felt triumphant. Maybe in another life I would have. But all I felt was stillness, disciplined relief, like a firefighter walking away from a blaze you didn't start, knowing you saved the foundation, knowing they'll probably still leave matches lying around, but now at least there's a hose nearby. They tried to erase me. Now I signed the eraser purchase orders. The call was scheduled for 8 a.m. sharp. No fanfare, no agenda. Just me, the lender, and the final act of a lesson they'd never forget. I placed the phone on speaker, the line already open with Melanie on the other end. Her voice, cool as always, didn't need confirmation. We both knew this was closure in contract form. "I'm ready to record the waiver," she said. "Do we have full documentation?" I flipped through the packet. Signed amendments, check. Updated title, check. Proof of safety budget transfer, $115K marked for infrastructure and training, already time-stamped in the ledger. I scanned each one, then looked across the table where the CFO sat like a ghost of last quarter's bonus. He gave a silent nod. Legal looked like she hadn't slept in 2 days. "I authorize the waiver," I said, calm and clean. "Conditional on all amendments remaining in force and safety funds remaining accessible to my office." There was a pause, a soft keystroke. Then Melanie said, "Waiver recorded, rider honored." A breath I didn't realize I'd been holding slipped out like smoke. No applause, no thanks. Just the hum of systems still standing because someone had bothered to care about them before they broke. Mr. Loafers showed up 30 seconds late, still trying to pretend he belonged at a table that now remembered why I was seated there in the first place. He tried to meet my eyes, gave me a half smile that wilted halfway through. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he mumbled. I didn't ask for it, didn't need it, but I nodded once and tapped the printed training schedule in front of me. "You'll deliver the first session with me, front row, and this time you'll learn the difference between optics and operations." He didn't reply, just sat down, the weight of accountability finally heavier than his slogans. Back in my office, my new office, rebranded without ceremony as the Records and Safety Lab, I unpacked the last box. Whiteboards, emergency diagrams, a stack of checklists I planned to rewrite with real teeth. On the far wall, I pinned the original demotion form, the one they tried to slide across the table without a second thought. It sat under a magnet that read, in blocky red letters, "Almost." That word held power now. Almost demoted, almost erased, almost cost the company $56 million. I took one last sip of coffee as Melanie's final confirmation email landed. Subject, waiver recorded, conditions locked. The line was clean, the vault closed. I scheduled the first drill for Monday, full exec participation, no opt-outs. Just protocol, policy, and consequences. This time understood. I didn't need applause. I had access. I had funding. I had teeth. And every system in this building now knew whose hand was on the fire alarm.